islands to about 1800 AD, towards the end of the 1700s. Our population rose from the few that came off of that first few canoes to about 800,000 people. To me, this is a success in survival, that they are out here on these islands being able to survive despite the wars, despite some of the diseases. They were able to survive from a few canoes to 800,000 people. I think that we may learn a lesson for us that are surviving today. When we look at this particular time period of 1800, what are the elements of success for survival? What did they do? How did they think? How did they believe? How did they exist that allowed them to survive and to multiply and to thrive in these islands? As I look back into this particular focal point of the 1800s, one of the things I see are the same things that they believed in when they came to Hawaii. When those first canoes came to Hawaii, they had their tools of survival. And one of the tools of survival, as I said before, was a very strong belief system. They still had that strong belief system at that time. They still admired intelligence and hard work. Those were admirable qualities. You see them in our literature, you see them in our history, the way they admire these two qualities. These people were all from the same general area that came and occupied these islands. They all had the same genealogical line. They all understood each other's beliefs and practices. They lived in the same environment. They understood Nakupa o Ka'aina, and they appreciated the giving that they received when they first came here. If we look further into how they survived in these islands at that particular time, besides having these fine points or these tools of survival, we will look at the individual and how they treated the individual at this time. If an individual had a task and he completed his task and still was able to maintain the code of ethics in completing his task, he was considered a pono, or a righteous person, therefore a very worthwhile citizen. But it does not, the survival of the race does not depend on an individual. The survival of the race, if a family is going to survive, the survival of the family depends on that family, the whole family, not the individual that is the patriarch of the family. But the whole family has to be pono. The whole family they all have to, as individuals, understand themselves, complete their task, maintain the ethics of the ethics of treating each other, and the moral standards for which they were raised. Then that family will survive. But this does not only count for the individual or the family, this also counts for the whole village. If the village wants to survive, they have to do exactly the same thing as the individual. They must know each other well, they must have the same belief system, they must be very strong, very pono in who they are. The village will survive. And then it goes up to the race. If the race must survive, they must also have the same code of ethics, the same genealogical line, the same respect for each other. At this point of time, it was also very important for us to procreate, for us to continue our genealogical lines. And so it was up to each generation to carry on this responsibility of continuing our genealogical lines. Continue our genealogical lines doesn't mean that we're having only one or two children. Continuing our genealogical lines meant that we had lots of children. There was nothing else to do, like have children. Also, there are good hands to work on the farm and go fishing, etc., maintaining the family. But the point of continuing your genealogical line, your lineage, was important. And so this was emphasized. If we look at the 1800s, and I don't know where I am in my paper. I really don't care that much about it. Some of the things are that, if we look at the 1800s, right at the turn of the century, from between the 1800s and the 1900s, that particular century can, to me, be summarized in 4 sentences. Before I go to those 4 sentences, and I don't treat it lightly. These were very important times for us because it was the introduction of other people with other cultures, people from other cultures, people with other genealogical background, people with different belief systems, people that were very strong about who they were. Before we go into that particular time period, let me just back up a little bit and talk about I talked about the code of ethics, talk about some of these code of ethics and the practices within the code of ethics, which was practiced at that time and still are being looked at today and talked about today, and for some of us are being practiced today. Something simple like aloha. Many of us use the word aloha. Our legislature just passed a bill, or I think it's passed, I don't know, that we would teach aloha to those people in government, teach aloha to other people. Aloha for us was second nature. Aloha we learned from na kupa aina. We learned from the land what aloha was all about. We learned from the wind, we learned from the sun, from the moon what aloha was all about. Because the word alo means to be face to face. The word ha means that I am giving you part of my essence, part of what is inside of me, my breath. And when we come together, my ha is your ha. I will help you, and I will give to you without asking to get anything back from you. I don't expect it. This is the true sense of aloha. It's very difficult for me to teach somebody about aloha, and then at the end of the lecture, ask them for money. There is a conflict of what aloha is all about. But at this time, the 1800, at the beginning of the 1800, aloha was second nature to our people. Hospitality was part of that aloha spirit. You don't ask people to come into your house and feed them and expect to go to their house the next day and be fed. You were expected to have people come into your house, and you were expected to feed them, and you did feed them. Even if you had only salt or a little bit poi or whatever, you fed them whatever you had. And that was part of your essence that went with them. The concept of aloha triggered an even higher practice. If there is aloha between myself and my neighbor learns this concept of aloha, he will also go out and help and give without asking. And this help and giving will catch on. Just as our first kupuna came over here and were given the help by na kupa o ka aina, the ocean and the sun and the winds. They learned that they must do this as well. And so other people who came to the islands, they were given this. Eventually, this aloha came back to them. and people helped them, and people gave to them without asking. What happens when this comes back to you is another practice that we call lokahi. It's a higher form of aloha because it has gone a cycle. You have not only been the teacher of what aloha is, but now you are a recipient of aloha. What you do, and it is as important to receive as it is to give. Because what you do when you receive is you elevate the pono, or the righteousness of the giver. And so it is the reciprocation of the giving, and eventually it does come back to you. This concept or this practice of lokahi was a very important practice to us. The other practice that we talk about a lot today is the practice of aloha aina. And aloha aina is basically, aloha aina means love the land. And my question is then, why should we love the land? We should love the land because it is the major nutritional source for our physical longevity. As simple as that. We are not better than the land, we are part of the land. And we share with it, it shares back with us. We must love the land because it is the foundation of our human existence. We don't come from the ocean, we're not ocean people. We don't live in the air, we live on the land. Therefore, we must love the land. We love the land because it is where the bones of our ancestors are, and eventually our bones will be there. The very essence of our ancestors are the things that we walk on. We receive from them, we take care of them. The land then, literally and metaphorically, is our mother. The land is our father. It is our ancestor. It is not something that is just coming out of my mouth. It's something that I feel in my na'au. When we talk aloha aina, that's the extent to which aloha aina should go. At the turn of the century the 1900, 1893, the United States decided to illegally overthrow our government, our way of life. And so they did. The four sentences that I was going to tell you to describe this particular time period, this century, between 1800 and 1900. One, and I call it, this particular time, I call it they came. One, they brought with them their religion, and they settled among us. Two, they brought with them their economic system as well as their education system. Three, they brought with them their guns and to establish their government. And number four, from 800,000 of us natives and 1,800. The turn of the century in 1900, there were 40,000 of us. That in itself is a summary of the 100 years. And if we, physically we were not persecuted, but psychologically and spiritually, we were devastated, we were destroyed. We were, and if I look at those same tools of survival, which our people had when they came on the first canoe, that they had during the 1800s. If I look at the same tools of survival what I see at this time is the fact that our belief system was so different that we didn't understand it. And so we trailed behind. We were no longer considered intelligent. There was a new economic system that we were not used to, that we had to adapt to. Therefore, we were considered lazy. We did not have the time to fish and to care for our family and to work the land because we have to get into this other system. And so we were considered lazy. We were unsure as to our code of ethics at this time. What philosophy do we follow? Do we follow the philosophy of our ancestors, or do we follow the philosophy of the new government, of the new people? The land use changed, our attitude toward the land changed. Our cultural practices and our language were suppressed. The political system was changed, just to name a few things. Today we're citizens of the United States, 1993, 1994. We are citizens of the United States. We are Americans. We have adapted. Within this 100, 200 years, we have adapted. We are Americans. We have been educated in the American system. Some of us have received our BA, some of us MA, some of us PhDs. We are Americans. We have become very smart the American way. Some of us are with the legislative system. We have become very smart in the political way. Many of us, 99% of us who are Hawaiians or part Hawaiians, are Christians. We have become religiously smart. So now that we are Americans, do we forget the past? How do we survive from the 1900s till now? If we look at the 2,000 years prior to this time and the survival instinct of our ancestors, our queen was correct in peacefully surrendering. In order for the 40,000 of us to survive, we have to surrender. And the peaceful surrender was a necessary point, again, for our survival. But again, we bring it back to today. Because we are American citizens and very smart in this particular way of life, we also have a peaceful revolt. We can lobby our legislatures and our congressmen to turn around some of the laws that has been established so that it becomes our benefit. So in our revolting, we have been able to gain some of the status that we have lost over the last 200 years. We have not forgotten our ancestors. We have not forgotten the way in which they came to these islands and their need to survive. So this need, the survival instinct is still with us. There are many questions during this particular period of time that we look at. We are, as Hawaiians, are again looking for the possibility of renewed sovereign entity. We may remain, there is a question of remaining with the United States or become totally autonomous. In any case, whatever we plan to do, whatever is decided, we still have to maintain our friendliness with the United States. We have lost a lot in our peaceful surrender. We have to think about how much more do we want to lose. The other question is, what do we want to retain when we look over the values, the code of ethics that was brought down to us? How do we move into our future? How do we utilize global peace to maintain our identity today? Is global peace a reality? Is there an example in the global community which offers the right prescription for peace, for survival of race, of language, of spiritual beliefs without persecution? I think Hawaii is an excellent example of that. A few years ago, we were looked at by our cousins from the South Pacific as the example of what not to be, because they looked at us as losing everything. Let's not be like the Hawaiians. They lost their land, they lost their culture, they lost their language. So let's hold on to our land, let's hold on to our government, was their sentiment. Today, I think we have turned that around so that they can look to us and say, we can do as our ancestors did. We can maintain our culture without persecution. First of all, we have to know who we are. There has to be an identity by each individual one of us who want to regain that Hawaiianness about us. Like I've cut through a lot of the negativism of these last 2,000 years, we need to do that, to look for that pearl within us. Within each one of us, there is a pearl that connects us, a very valuable part of us that connects us to our ancestors. We have that, and we can use it. We are still part of our ancestors, and our ancestors are still part of us. If we want to, with that knowledge, if we want to move ahead, we can look into that part of us that will allow us to continue. And if we do this, then local identity is completed. We would have set a groundwork, an example for others of our cousins to follow in the South Pacific. We look to the Indians and some of the Indian tribes in their success in moving away, becoming autonomous, becoming a sovereignty entity, as a thing that we would like to follow. But we are not Indians, we're Hawaiians. Their examples are good, but they must move along on their own, in their own tribal ways. We can look at their examples, we must move along in our own Hawaiian way with our ancestors. Although we are citizens again of the United States of America, America is not our father, it is not our mother, it is not our ancestor. Hawaii is our father, our mother, and our ancestor. I know who I am, and I know what I must do in order that my family and their ancestral connection continue. The need to continue the family bloodline can be worked from where I stand in our family. We understand that. We understand that we need to continue the language. We understand that we need to continue the spiritual connection of life. That we again need to mahalo na kupuoka'aina and allow them to survive within us so that we can become one with them again, and in doing this, survive upon this land. We have been fortunate to inherit a family tradition, and through this family tradition being able to connect to our ancestors, and through this family tradition be able to move our family ahead, being proud of the fact that we're Hawaiians. The examples of lifestyle which we lead in our family, we're well aware and we practice what we what we have. We practice these codes of ethics. And when I say I don't mean I by myself. I mean there are others out there who feel the same way as I do, who have treated their families the same way, whose family move along with them in identifying their local identity. But our pond is small and our ripple is contained. And our ripples affect only a few people. The more there are of us, the more it will affect. So getting out into the greater world, having a worldview of the treatment of people to each other, the code of ethics. Because I look very strongly upon my identity to my Hawaiian side, I think all of us who are in this room and wherever must also look upon their identity and who they are, and be pa'a in who they are, and be secure in who they are. If each of us know who we are and where we're coming from, then we would have more respect for one another. Then we would not have this dominance or try to dominate because of our insecurity about what we must do and the fact that we must put down these people that we don't understand. But if you can show me that you are pa'a in who you are, I will show you that I am pa'a in who I am, and we will live as brothers. Mahalo.
We have 10 minutes or so for question and answers. I understand some of you have submitted questions before. If not, I think we will just recognize you, and please speak loudly. I'll try to repeat your question to and of course other members of the panel as well. Don't be shy, it's a fascinating experience. Yes, please, in the back first. The question is addressed to both holiness and the poor. The strategy, I hope the word is used in the spiritual sense as well as the political sense, of personal identity, Hawaiian identity, and the broader global demands. And first ask Pua to respond.
I don't know if I have a strategy. I haven't sat to think about this, how I'm going to pull everybody together. I don't really want to. I think the only, as I ended my talk, I talked about my association with my family. I think that basically that's what I have to stick to, the fact that we are strong as to who we are. And to me, examples are a more acceptable, certainly stronger to follow than what is coming out of my mouth. I think we have to be examples of who we are and what we believe in. And showing that we are these examples of who we are and what we believe in will be easier to follow. People don't have to second guess that what we're saying and what we're doing are really the same thing, or are they different? So I think more so than have a strategy of teaching people and talking is to show that I am who I am.
I have a question for His Holiness. As winner of the
Please,
Nobel.
please. I think it's important for us to keep some order here. And would you address the question first, then I'll come to you. That's the second hand question. Sorry.
First of all, I miss Ahelia Antari, not Mr. I wanted to get that clear.
Thank you.
My question is, why look at things so separately, like family or Hawaiian culture, American culture that came? Couldn't we look more as we're all humanity living on one planet with a common goal, not of just surviving, but of living peaceful, prosperously, joyfully, and happily together as a whole, as one. And with every human being thinking that thought, creating and manifesting that existence instead of manifesting and creating surviving. Comments, please.
Challenging question. Forget about local identities. Be universal. So I think it's a wrong way of putting it, but the sentiment is there.
You know, my whole talk was focusing on being Hawaiian because that's who I am. That doesn't mean that all of us will be Hawaiian. That means this is the example that I'm putting forth because this is the example that I get to know. If I can live peacefully within my environment and among my own people, I can certainly live peacefully with other people. You need to look at finer points of what is being said and not so much these separatist thing of what is being said. My whole thing about local identity is, first of all, I have to know who I am. You have to know about who you are. He has to know who he is. And in knowing who we are and in being comfortable with who we are, then we can live as brothers and as friends and certainly as sisters. But we have to know that first. Then there will be more peace in the global community when I know that somebody else is not trying to dominate me, but is pa'a in who he is, and I'm pa'a in who I am.
With apology, the gentleman over there, I interrupted.
Thank you very much. His Holiness, as the winner of the Nobel Peace Prize, we're surely aware of the dilemma that many of our world leaders are having today in terms of peacekeeping and intervention. Aside from what individuals can do, families, societies, etc., do you have any comment to make upon what our world leaders should be doing to try to maintain the stability and peace that we've discussed?
The question is, what advice that His Holiness will offer to the world leaders concerning global peace?
Oh, difficult question. Difficult question. Sometimes I feel of course, leaderships. I think they inspire their individual feelings or views or sentiments. They have to act according to their circumstances. So sometimes I think now like many politicians, before they took the responsibility, they promised many things, but I think sometimes they little bit, I think wrong motivation or wrong deceptive motivation. That's I think. But sometimes I think they are very sincere but then when they took the real responsibility, then they have to face the reality. So it becomes difficulties. So in any way, I feel our whole sort of, I think the atmosphere, right, or in the international atmosphere, I think, of course, this, I mean, today's the atmosphere, sometimes I feel unhealthy. Yeah. This happened because of, I think, many factors in the past. So this cannot change overnight, and also by individual leaders. I feel whole society has the responsibility, and after all, the individual leaders come from that society. So first, I think we have to think, and also they have to take care about our society as a whole. Here, of course, the government and some others, the individual people, certainly they have some great influence. Yet, I think each of us have the potential to create better society. Now here I'm saying this particular field, better society means not necessarily economy alone, but more honest. More peace. I think honest, more sincere, as a compassionate attitude develop. Less crime, more truthful, will be more honest. So usually, unrest or the opposite force of peace usually is to come. Where people not much think about moral, not much think about ethical values, but rather power, money, things like that. Then these people no hesitation to utilize any sort of method. So that's why more unhappy things happen. Here one topic usually is I raise. That is the idea of demilitarization, which when I spoke there, I forgot. So now this opportunity now I would like to add the idea of demilitarization. That is, I think, very essential. So long human being is there is some part of our negative emotion always there. For that, usually I call sort of inner disarmament. Try to reduce hatred, or I think the unlimited greed. These things is one way, and try to increase the genuine sense of brotherhood, sisterhood. That is the way of inner disarmament. Meantime, we must make every effort to external disarmament. Now look, the United States. Now many people, including the government, have compelled to look very seriously about the gun laws. So the gun is available, the weapon is available. There's some disasters. It's always happen. Actually, what is the purpose of gun? Not making noise, but something else. So if gun never used, not fulfilled. So they basically the gun, I think, should be, the weapon should be reduced and eventually eliminated. So already I think there are a positive sign, signs. I think now today, as a result of the two blocks are gone, in spite many unpleasant events there, I think at least the threat of a nuclear holocaust now much reduced, and people already is talking, eventually, I mean, even is planning the reduce of nuclear weapon. These are, I think, very, very positive. Now, still, we must make every effort, you see, to lead, to go is this line. Eventually, the one is my dream is the individual nation should be completely demilitarized, and then we may need some kind of force, some troublemaker of people. So always happen. So in order to face this reality, we may have some kind of, we may have to keep some forces, but that force can create on the basis of regional basis, or eventually, like you see, international basis controlled by United Nations. Now already the United Nations now involved some forces under the UN control already now happening. So this should expand. So therefore, the nation to nation, then much less threat without weapon, and also another method about the demilitarization is unified forces of different countries. Like although I think as a first step, the initial stage, like Franco-German unified forces. On the regional basis, individual nation keep forces, but commander somehow unified, so that within that group, and become impossible to fight, to utilize, to mobilize the army. So that eventually can expand. So in any way, I think it is our individual responsibility to think about these things. And again, sometimes I feel the concept of war, concept of military establishment, I feel sometimes many people, many nations, somehow I think brainwashed. So if you think about this vengeance, and also part of our nature, still I do feel when I saw the weapons, oh, very smart, very beautiful, isn't it? Very attractive. Even it's a small toy weapon, like you see, air rifle, very beautiful, isn't it? I think, and the worst thing is our concept is war, defense, in the name of defense, is something sacred. Actually, it's based on the very important feeling of border. We and they. On that concept, on the basis of that concept, military forces, military establishment, is it different? So long the powerful military establishment there, then if something slightly wrong, there is the potential of the bloodshed. So the very concept of this war, hero, I think is dangerous. So important to right from the beginning, to change that attitude. Now, military establishment no longer relevant. And also now, practically, now I think the idea of ahimsa, idea of non-violence, now it's spreading fast. Look, Israel and Palestine, through decades. In fact, in some cases, I feel that both sides deliberately promote hatred and bloodshed, adopt their method, most effective method. But eventually, the circumstances become such. Even these parties now come to term agreement in the spirit of reconciliation. in the spirit of non-violence. I think these are very positive. So the international situation is such. Now, non-violent method is more appropriate, more realistic than using weapon. So I think this is, a good opportunity, right? A good time also good time. So I think each individual must make every effort. Now, most important, as I mentioned there, they cultivate here good human spirit. Now, this is most important. I think the layman, the parent, have more responsibility than monk and nun. You see, first, your own family, within your own home, must cultivate, must create the atmosphere of love and compassion. So you see, each individual family, once develops that kind of nature, that kind of atmosphere, then the new generation, the young children, the new generation. Now these, because they are right from the beginning, they develop, they survive, they grow within that kind of atmosphere. That's, I think, one of the most important way to develop or to build better world.
That's the signal for us to move on. Dr. Chandra Musafa is a Malaysian, a messenger of peace, and advocate for human rights, a prolific writer, and a leader of the international Muslim community dedicated to promoting global consciousness and global action for the creation of a just world guided by a spiritual and moral vision of life and living. His topic is global dominance, cultural identity, and Islam. He will deliver his thoughts from his seat there. Let's welcome.
His Holiness the Dalai Lama, revered leader of the people of Tibet, Professor Tu Wenming, Ms. Warani Kanahili, brothers and sisters, peace be with you. The theme of our symposium focuses upon the global community. But is there a global community? If by community we mean an association of people with certain shared values, shared rights, shared responsibilities, and a certain shared sense of destiny, then a global community does not exist. What does exist is a global system, an unjust, unequal global system which allows a few who are strong to dominate the many who are weak. The injustice of domination is reflected in every sphere of global life. In global politics, it is the superpower of the day and its allies, through the United Nations and other such institutions, who determine the fate of millions of children, women, and men in Bosnia, Palestine, Iraq, Libya, in East Timor, and Tibet, motivated very often by their own selfish interests. In the global economy, a mere 23% of the world's population controls 85% of the world's wealth. It is because of this control that the recent General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, GATT, ensured that most of the benefits of global trade would go to the North. The North will gain by as much as $270 billion, while impoverished Africa will lose $2.6 billion every year as a result of this new trade agreement. Indeed, it is because of an unjust global system that 1.4 billion human beings, a quarter of the entire human family, remain mired in absolute poverty. It is because of an unjust global system that poor nations are burdened with huge debts to the tune of something like $1.6 trillion. Debts which kill, brothers and sisters, debts which kill 650,000 infants across 3 continents every year, in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. It is this unjust global system which allows 4 news agencies located in the West to control 90% of all international news and information. It is this system which allows a minority in the West to disseminate ideas and images, values and visions from its own culture as the defining themes of a global culture. This Western-dominated global culture, whatever its many noble attributes, has generated a certain notion of life and of living which is detrimental to the vast majority of humanity. It is the idea that life revolves around wealth, power, and pleasure. It is this image of living, transmitted through the media and propelled by the powerful global economic forces at work, which threatens local identities and local cultures. This distorted, perverted view of life is creating a global culture which contains the 7 most deadly sins which Mahatma Gandhi warned humanity about many decades ago. What are these deadly sins that the great Mahatma warned us about? Number 1, politics without principle. Number 2, wealth without work. Number 3, pleasure without conscience. Number 4, knowledge without character. Number 5, commerce without morality. Number 6, science without humanity. And number 7, worship without sacrifice. If we reflected upon each and every one of these deadly sins, we would be convinced that culture today, our way of life, is very closely connected with those sins. Politics has no principle. People earn wealth without work, through the stock market, for instance, through the manipulation of financial capital. One seeks pleasure without conscience, because pleasure has become an end in itself. One worships, it's true, but there is no notion of sacrifice that must accompany prayer. Each and every one of these sins transgresses the most cherished values and principles in each and every one of our spiritual and moral traditions. In Islam, as in Christianity, as in Judaism, as in many other religions, the purpose of life is not the pursuit of power, or the pursuit of wealth, or the pursuit of pleasure as ends in themselves. The purpose of life is very, very clear. It's unambiguous. It is to serve God. Serving God in Islam, as in many other religions, means in reality absorbing and assimilating all those universal eternal values and principles which are so fundamental for human existence. That's what serving God means. It means transforming the self, transforming society on the basis of those values. It means becoming committed, totally committed to justice, to love, to compassion, to equality, to humility, to moderation, to freedom. This is what it means in the real sense of the word. It is interesting that His Holiness the Dalai Lama spoke about compassion. Compassion is also a very important value, a vital principle in Islam. In fact, compassion is one of the two most praiseworthy attributes associated with the name of God in Islam. Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. In the name of God, the compassionate and the merciful. Now, it is so important in Islam, the notion of compassion, that every verse in the Quran contains the concept of compassion and of mercy. It is so important, dear brothers and sisters, that millions and millions of Muslims, 1.2 billion of them, when they perform their daily prayers 5 times a day, it is this phrase that they utter over and over again. In the name of God, the compassionate and the merciful. Compassion is a vital element in the notion of character and culture as far as Islamic civilization is concerned. If there's any other value that is as important as compassion, it is justice. Justice very often is linked with compassion in Islam. You have to be just. The Quran tells us over and over again. It is justice that defines your piety. It is justice, the Quran tells us, which was the message and the mission of every prophet that came to earth right from the beginning of time. And every one of them is acknowledged, revered, and respected in Islam. Every one of those prophets. And their message was justice. It is justice which will determine how you will be judged on the day of judgment. Justice is vital. It is compassion and justice which determine Muslim culture and Muslim civilization. So when one talks of the identity of a Muslim, this is the bedrock of that identity. This is its anchor sheet, the notion of compassion and justice. It is true, dear brothers and sisters, that on a number of occasions Muslims themselves have not lived up to the ideals of compassion and justice. But nonetheless, these ideals are vital in Islamic philosophy. Now, how does such a philosophy of life, a culture, an identity that revolves around compassion and justice, rooted in God consciousness, how does that dovetail with the sort of culture that we have today? A culture that revolves around power, wealth, and pleasure. The contradiction is obvious. And for a lot of Muslims, the contradiction is also very painful. It is painful because that culture which worships wealth, power, and pleasure seeks to dominate large segments of the Muslim world for reasons that are connected with economics and power. It so happens, as many of you know, dear brothers and sisters, that the lifeline of Western industrial civilization, what keeps Western industrial civilization alive, that lifeblood flows beneath the feet of Muslim peoples, oil. Because of oil. Because of the oil that is found in Muslim lands. You find that we have a global system where a minority in the north have, for the most part of this century, tried to control and dominate those who produce and sell oil. This, it seems to me, is at the root of the conflict between these two cultures and civilizations. It is control and domination, the desire to control the oil for the benefit of Western civilization. And this has been compounded by a number of other factors in history. It has been compounded by conflicts like Palestine, Bosnia, Somalia, and so on. but it's also been compounded by centuries of prejudice, of ignorance, of antagonism between these two civilizations. So deep is the prejudice, so great is the antagonism, that in the interface of no other two civilizations do you have so much misunderstanding as between Islam and Western civilization. It is in the midst of this that Muslim societies are trying to reassert their identity. It's in the midst of this that they're trying to rediscover their own destinies. It is in the midst of this that they're trying to regain control over their own resources, that they want to exert authority and sovereignty over their own lands. Surely, this is a legitimate struggle. Every people have a right to exercise authority over their own resources, to determine their own destiny, to decide their own fate as a people. What is sad is sometimes the very powerful do not want to concede that right. They do not want to concede the legitimacy of the struggle, to exercise control over one's own destiny, over one's own resources, land, and people. I'd like to submit to you, dear brothers and sisters, that those of us who believe in human dignity and social justice must be prepared to acknowledge the legitimacy of the struggle of people who want to assert authority over their own destiny. Having said that, let me also add very quickly that in the course of struggling to assert their own destiny, to determine their own fate, there are certain groups within the Muslim world who in a sense have betrayed the values and principles of Islam. They have become dogmatic, they have become exclusive in their orientation, some of them have become sectarian in outlook, some of them pursue very extreme methods in order to achieve legitimate goals. This is wrong. It is wrong, and it has no support within Islamic philosophy. Muslims everywhere must realize that what they are fighting is not something that is exclusive to them. They are fighting domination and control, which is a global phenomenon, and they're not the only victims. There are many other victims of domination, of control. They're not the only ones who have been denied the right to exercise control over their own destiny. Others have also been denied this right. They must see their struggle as a struggle which involves many other human beings, all victims of domination and control. They are all the oppressed. The concept of the oppressed in the Quran, for instance, is not confined to any particular people or particular religion. It's anyone who has become a victim of injustice. And the oppressed must understand this, that the struggle is against domination and control, which revolves around power, wealth, and pleasure. It is this system which denies our humanity, which denies our inner spirituality. And that is the system that we have to struggle against, all of us. Our struggle today is a common struggle against the culture of money, market, and machine, which has become so powerful, which has become so overwhelmingly dominant. That's our struggle. It's our common struggle. It's a struggle against a system that has emerged, which is in so many ways so inhuman, which is in so many ways a denial of all the spiritual and moral values which determine and decide on the character of human civilization. This is what we are struggling against. This is what we must understand. We are struggling against a system which is full of iniquities and injustices. Our struggle is for the dignity and justice of all human beings. And we must understand that in this struggle, what we're trying to do is to restore what I regard as the human being's most vital identity, more important than all our particularistic identities. Our identity is connected with our locality, our community, our religion, our nation. The most important identity must remain our human identity. That must remain our most important identity. And in this last decade of the 20th century, surely that must be our mission, to restore our human identity, rooted in a spiritual vision of the human being. Because there's the other alternative, which we don't want. There's the other vision of human identity, which we must repulse. That the human being is a mere assemblage of aimless atoms. That's not the human being. That the human being is a mere bundle of biological urges. That's not the human being. The human being is something else, more profound, more beautiful, more sacred, more reverent. That's the vision of the human being that we have to restore. That's our struggle. And one hopes, dear brothers and sisters, that in this struggle, Muslims, together with others, would realize that working together, standing shoulder to shoulder, is the only way. There is no other way. There is no choice. The world has become physically a common home to all of us. We cannot run away from this. It is yet to become a common home in the spiritual sense, in the moral sense, but it's already become a common home in the physical sense. We have to stand together. We have to work together. And to Muslim communities, I always carry this message. Do not forget that your own heritage is the heritage of working together with others. Don't forget that it is this community, if you look at its history, that stretched out its hand of hope and hospitality to the thousands and thousands of Jews who were persecuted in Europe for centuries. Every time there was a pogrom in Europe, the Jews found refuge in Muslim lands. And when the Jews were expelled from Jerusalem in AD 73, and for more than 600 years, they were banned, barred from returning to Jerusalem, first by the Roman conquerors and then by the Christian empire builders. It was a Muslim caliph, Umar ibn Khattab, who in AD 638 allowed the Jews to return to Jerusalem. Now that's the tradition of Muslim civilization. Reach out once again, work with the others of all communities, all human beings who believe in justice and in a better world for everyone. That should be the approach of the Muslim today. And at the same time, it is important that the Muslim, like people in other religions, understand that their message, their spiritual and moral message, is without any doubt at all a universal message. Reinterpret that message, bring out its universal essence. Make everyone see what that universal essence is. No one owns God. God is not the monopoly of any one religion or community. God is everywhere, belongs to everyone. We don't own God. God owns us and owns all of creation, as a great Christian theologian said. This notion of a divine presence that transcends everything, including race and religion, is a concept which many Muslims would be able to empathize with. A contemporary Muslim scholar, for instance, has said, the divine presence can be glimpsed in the eyes of a mother beholding her infant, the rising of the sun, a bird in flight, the first flowers of spring. The wonders and mystery of creation cannot be the monopoly of any one people. It is only if we understand the divine presence in this way that we will be able to attain global peace. Peace through surrender to the divine, which is what the word Islam itself means. Peace through submission to God. Thank you.
you have questions and comments on Dr. Muzafar's thought-provoking and moving presentation. While you're formulating your thoughts, please make your questions clear and short, and your comments concise. And there's one question that is already handed to me, and I'll first read this question and then open up the floor for discussion. By the way, if you have questions, written questions, please give them to the ushers or to the registration. And this afternoon, we try to accommodate as many of your written questions as we possibly can. Considering the ideas of interdependency and changing, can sovereignty and individual identity really coexist?
At this stage in history, I do not see a contradiction between sovereignty and interdependence. One of the very strong reasons for supporting a notion of sovereignty at this stage is this. If we want to build a world in which all communities and all nations, all peoples, would be able to bring their offerings to the banquet table, everyone would be able to contribute, then I think there is an argument for supporting the notion of sovereignty. It would be a beautiful world if, for instance, through the exercise of sovereignty, the literature of each and every community could articulate sentiments about peace and justice and environment and community. I would like to know, for instance, what the great Tibetan tradition has to say about these things. I remember how some years ago I discovered a Tibetan poem from the 12th century, which was so relevant to issues connected with materialism and consumerism today. It was a poem entitled Castles in the Sky. Now, this is what we would like to see. Each community bringing its wealth of literature, ideas, philosophy to this common banquet table. That's only possible if we recognize individual identities within the present context. What we don't want is a situation where we describe something as global and universal when actually it comes from one particular tradition. It would be a very sad world for everyone, including many of my friends in the West, if the most important food items in the future were McDonald's and Kentucky Fried Chicken and all the rest of it. Because I'm sure that there are other dishes which are perhaps much better than Kentucky Fried Chicken and McDonald's, probably other traditions in other parts of the world. So let's all bring our offerings to this common banquet table. And the only way to do that is by recognizing, and more than that, strengthening individual identities and individual sovereignties at this stage in our history.
Yes, please.
I have one question for motion speaker.
Just one question.
And I have three questions for this one. So this one, can I ask one question to this also?
Would you please state the question?
Oh, okay. Before I ask the question, may I also offer
That could be done afterwards. Please ask the question. Right.
what is the significance of this movement?
The question to, would you ask the question to President Salman?
Okay. Why do the Muslims believe in retaliation? Is it something that Allah said in the Bible?
The question is on retaliation. Is it actually stated, you're talking about the Quran? Right?
Thank you. There isn't a specific reference in the Quran to retaliation as such, but there is a very clear notion of injustice and the need to rectify injustice. If a great injustice has been done to you, then it's only right that you respond. Because if you don't respond to the injustice, there is a great danger that not only your generation, but future generations will suffer because the injustice has not been rectified. So you have to rectify injustice. But rectifying injustice does not mean that you should not forgive. Because the Quran says, and this is very specific, that if those who are against you are inclined towards peace, then you too should be inclined towards peace. That's a very important principle. But if you find that your land has been taken away, that your resources have been destroyed, that your women have been raped, and you don't respond to that situation, then I think you're not really acting as a human being. This is a very, very human reaction. Thank you.
Yes, please, in the back. And please speak loudly.
Very pleased, first of all, that His Holiness has referred to the fact that boundaries of nation states are not real boundaries, and it's been referred to by all the colleagues that culture is something that should be cherished and retained, and that self-determination and sovereignty is very important. Now, I'm curious to hear what His Holiness and the other panel members would say to a culture that has inherent in its structure elements of dominance, aggression, or greed that can't be extracted from that culture. Would that culture still have the inherent right to exist and the right to claim its sovereignty and self-determination?
I think the question is very widely heard, so let's begin with the responses first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know whether you were referring to a particular culture, but if one is going to be specific about this, I would say that what sociologists and students of politics describe as Western colonial culture, which means the culture that has evolved in the last 500 years, but especially in the last 200 years when it has taken on a particular form. This culture, Western colonial culture, is undoubtedly dominant and destructive. It is different from other types of empires in the past. Western colonial empire building should not be compared to most other empires in the past. If you compare it to, say, for instance, the Chinese empire of the past, and people have made this comparison, you'll find that the Chinese empire was by and large an empire that never sought to dominate or to destroy others. There was some form of relationship, without any doubt, with other cultures and communities. But if you look at the long centuries of China's relationship with Southeast Asia, for instance, it was not an attempt to destroy those cultures. But with colonial culture, everything changed. Whole communities were ravaged, destroyed. Why did this happen? It has, I think, a lot to do with some of the distinctive elements of Western colonialism, including its racist trait, which had a biological root. It had something to do with the way in which Western colonial culture was able to harness the use of technology, which others couldn't do because it came in earlier periods, and a number of other factors. Now, these were the reasons behind the type of destruction that took place. The point I want to make is this, that while Western colonial culture has been destructive, it does not mean that other parts of Western civilization are also dominant and destructive. They are not. Christianity, by and large, as we know it, is not a dominant, destructive civilization. You take one example, the relationship between the human being and nature. Let's not forget it's the same Christianity which some colonial exploiters and conquerors had used to justify what they did in the Americas and the Caribbean. But it is the same Christianity that produced the Benedictine monks with a tremendous reverence for nature. It is the same Christianity that produced St. Francis of Assisi. So as far as Christian culture is concerned, there are elements in it which do not lend themselves to domination. So I think what one has to do in the West, if I may suggest, is this: one has to harness other elements from Western civilization. The colonial past does not offer any hope.
The time is really up, and it's time to break for lunch, but two announcements. Those with appropriate name tags have reserved lunch in the lobby. For those unable to make reservations, lunch will be available in hotel restaurants. When you should return promptly at 1 o'clock, keep name tags on for the re-entry. Thank you very much, and thank you for the panelists. Those with the yellow